pretty and all. Anyway, so we're going to try to cover the pharmacology of alcohol. We're going to briefly discuss chemistry and types of alcohol, some history, epidemiology, pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, and then some specifics for alcohol as opposed to most of the other drugs. Alcohol is a depressant. So all of the annotations from previously given this are still here. Anyway, so we're not going to cover the other depressants in this lecture. Alcohol certainly can cause, for some people, at least initially, euphoria. It can also lead to nausea, vomiting, a sense of overconfidence usually. It can certainly lead to dependence, otherwise we wouldn't be talking about it, most likely. It definitely causes mood swings, and in increasing doses causes unconsciousness, coma, and of course it is a poison that can kill you. So the one that is of importance in terms of altering your mental state is ethanol. It has this chemical formula, 2 carbons and an OH group. So this is oxygen, hydrogen, and carbon. And that has this rough chemical structure here. If you actually look at something that's more realistic in terms of the electron clouds in this molecule, this is a more realistic model. So everybody knows about rubbing alcohol or isopropyl because you probably have it at home to try and clean a wound or clean something, maybe your glasses. Ethanol is usually made from grain. It's made from sugar. Grain is a good source of that. Methanol is often made from cellulose, thus called a wood alcohol. The difference between the two is that if you drink methanol, even in small quantities, it can make you sick. In moderate quantities, it can make you blind. And in large quantities, it is lethal. Another alcohol is ethylene glycol. Most people have that sitting around somewhere, but it's one of the constituents in antifreeze. The fun thing about the proof of alcohol is that back on pirate ships, rum used to have about 50% alcohol. And so that was enough that some of the wise guys on the ship would drink it and try and replace what they had consumed with water. And the way the captain would check and see if somebody was telling the truth or not was he'd pour some of the rum, supposedly anyway, over some black powder. And if the black powder ignited, that was proof that it was really rum and not diluted rum. So another common thing that you'll find in lab or in a hardware store is denatured alcohol. It starts out as ethanol, but it's also then broken down somewhat to form some of it into methanol, some of it into isopropanol. So it is a poison, as in lethal, don't drink it. And during Prohibition, a lot of people didn't seem to realize that or care. All they could get their hands on was denatured alcohol. They drank it and died by the thousands. One interesting characteristic of alcohols is that they vary in solubilities, and they have the full spectrum, as in methanol is infinitely soluble in water. So is ethanol, and so is propanol. But as you continue to increase the number of carbons in this chain, butanol, having 4, is only partially soluble. And as you continue to increase, by the time you get to 8, it's minimally soluble. And by the time you get to 10 carbons, it doesn't dissolve in water. Now it acts more like an oil, even though it's still an alcohol. So this is not the first time we're going to run into differences in solubility in water. So I just wanted to bring this to your attention, that eventually this will be important for a number of the other drugs that we study. So this is just the first time we're going to run into this. And decanol is something that if it were consumed would preferably end up in your fat stores, not in your bloodstream. So it would be treated like an oil. I want you to watch the pre-recorded lecture, but when it comes to the epidemiology section in this week's lecture on alcohol, you can skip that part because that's what we're going to cover right now. And I haven't had a chance to update it in the video yet, but this is for the most recent data available. So the background of this is actually alcohol attributable death by country. And obviously, Russia and parts of Eastern Europe have by far the highest number of people that die of alcohol attributable causes. But this slide you might want to pay attention to. Epidemiology. It's upon people study. So it's the study of populations, basically. And it is the basis of all public health. It's made up of three basic things: assessment of the distribution, finding the determinants, and then application of that to control health problems. And we've seen a lot of this recently with social distancing, masking, and how many people in your county or your state have COVID. That's all done by epidemiologists. The other thing that this week's pre-discussion video is about adverse childhood experiences. And actually, one of the physicians that was doing that study, Dr. Anda, was an epidemiologist from the CDC. And in that case, they were looking at childhood adversity, but that was epidemiology as well. So, there are two basic bodies of the government that look at drug use. National Institute on Drug Abuse, or NIDA, is part of the federal government whose mission it is to advance science on the causes and consequences of drug use and addiction and apply that knowledge to improve individual and public health. And they were actually founded in 1974, which is after some of the studies were actually underway. And their headquarters is in Maryland, just like the National Institutes of Health. And they currently administer or oversee this Monitoring the Future survey, which it's known best anyway for collecting information about 8th, 10th, and 12th graders and their use and perception of drugs. So that's one of the surveys that we'll be referring to on a regular basis for each one of these classes or drugs as we cover them. The other one, of course, is from SAMHSA, which is Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. And they are a branch of the United States Department of Health and Human Services. So NIH is a part of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services as well. But this one is a direct branch from that department. But anyway, they are charged with improving the quality and availability of treatment and rehab services in order to reduce illness, death, disability, and cost to society resulting from substance abuse and mental health or mental illness. They are also headquartered in Maryland, and they were founded in 1992, so pretty recent. And the study that we use, that they publish the reports for anyway, is this National Survey on Drug Use and Health. It looks at adults for the most part, but it also looks at 12-year-old and up. And I usually use the statistics for 12 and up for whole population, if they're available. And this survey, this Monitoring the Future survey, started back in 1975. So we have some information all the way back to 1975. This one started in 1965 under the name the National Household Survey on Drug Abuse. And it kept that name until 2001 when it switched over to this National Survey on Drug Use and Health. And the reason I'm covering this is because as treatment professionals, you'll want to keep up with this information. This is your bread and butter. These are the people that you treat. All right, so enough on epidemiology. Let's get into the alcohol use epidemiology. And this is from the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, and they have a survey as well. But this is just estimates of alcohol consumption per person per year over the period of roughly 1850 to 2013. And although there have been variations, you can see that overall it's been about 8 liters over that entire period, with, some periods when it went up and some periods when it went down. And this is during Prohibition. And the curve actually goes like this at the beginning of Prohibition, and then it goes right back up to about that. And that's why they ended Prohibition. It didn't really work. People were drinking almost like they were before. All right, so this is looking at the distribution of alcohol use by the volume consumed in a week on average. So 1/3, so this is when you divide 100% of people up into tenths. So this is 10% of people, and this is 10% and 10%. So 30% of people don't drink at all in America anyway. And then the next 30% drink less than 1 drink per week. And the next 30% drink quite a bit more, between 2 and 15 drinks per week. And the last 10% drinks more than the other 90% put together. This last 10% drinks just over 10 drinks a day. And so these are the people that actually support the alcohol industry. Because like I said, their consumption of alcohol is more than the other 90% of the population. So anytime you hear an ad for beer or liquor, and at the end they say, drink responsibly, wink, wink, nod, nod, know what I mean? Know what I mean? It's a joke, because these people don't drink responsibly, and they're the ones that are most likely going to be consuming that product. Anyway, yeah, he limits himself to 1 glass a day. That, of course, brings up the problem with what is a standard drink. And if you're not drinking at a bar, if you're drinking at home, do people actually pour themselves a standard drink? Well, usually not. Usually they pour themselves a triple and call it a shot. And often when it comes to other things like wine, they have a glass where it holds more like 3 glasses of wine in 1 glass. So then this is looking at the average consumption per week over your lifetime as a man or a woman. So on average, starting around 15, people start drinking, and they drink up to, for guys anyway, by the time they're in their early 20s, they're drinking about 13 drinks a week. Women don't peak out till about 40, and they are drinking a mighty, maybe 3.5 drinks a week. All right, so then this is looking at, and this is from SAMHSA, from that national survey on drug abuse and health, or drug use and health. And this is looking at 3 different categories of drinking. Alcohol use at all is the top category. Binge drinking, as of 2021, is here in orange. And heavy alcohol use is down here in the yellow. And any alcohol use is obviously defined. Binge drinking is for guys more than 5 drinks in 1 sitting. For girls, it's more than 4 drinks in 1 sitting, usually considered 2 hours. And then heavy drinking is where you have more than 5 binges in a month, according to this survey that we're using. So although the most people, which is just over 60% of people, are using alcohol in the 21 to 25 age group, there's more binge drinking in the 26 to 29 age group, or heavy drinking rather, at 10.5%. And that's the highest for heavy drinking. For binge drinking, it's same age category, the 21 to 25. And although we'll get into this a little bit more later, it's interesting to look at generational use when it comes to the distribution per age, because some drugs, like this is marijuana, were much more heavily consumed by baby boomers than they were by other generations. And alcohol, on the other hand, has remained relatively constant in its amount of consumption, all the way from the lucky few born between 1923 and 42, all the way up to the millennials born in 83 through 2000. The amount of alcohol and the rough contour of this curve is the same. And it's about a peak of just over 80% of people that are consuming. So this is the official results of the 2021 National Survey on Drug Use and Health, and I'll cover a couple of the slides from that regarding alcohol use. When it comes to, and this is people who started using in the past year, initiates, by far the most people who started using were of alcohol at 4.1 million people. The second one was marijuana at 2.6 million.